Hello everyone, and welcome back to the JKC archive. When you were last here, you may have noticed a comment I left talking about a potential behind-the-scenes special. It's been a year since the remastered version of the series was released. Unfortunately, I don't have anything like a potential spin-off series or even a 9th entry to show you this year. But I've felt the most I can do for Halloween 2023 is detail the work and process that went into making or essentially remaking the entire Urban Legends series. So, without further hesitation, let's get started. First and foremost, we'll start where this idea began.
As far back as 2011, Justin's distinctive editing style for the Urban Legends series left an influence on my own editing as a whole. My familiarity with the series and JK Cinema itself extends further back. Although I never personally engaged with the JK Cinema forums, my interest in the series led me down a rabbit hole of the entire website. Eventually, I developed a deep appreciation for the creativity and sheer enjoyment that went into the various animations, games, and discussions that Justin and the JKC community had to offer. In 2018, my fascination with JK Cinema grew to the point where I felt compelled to archive and preserve the site for future audiences, not just because it meant something to me, but because it meant something to others and was a part of early internet history. As time progressed, I found myself pondering the possibilities of modernizing some of JK Cinema's games and animations. And that's where I had the idea to remaster the entire Urban Legends series.
Amusingly enough, some of the early attempts at remastering the series involved simply remixing the audio for the first 2 entries. They're actually still here, as they were up for a while on this channel, but they were set to unlisted after the initial announcement for the complete series. You can still view them if you'd like. The links are in the description. Though, if you're looking for a mostly unchanged Urban Legends experience, you can't go wrong with a complete re-upload of all entries, separated with original audio and visual quality included. Shout out to Nunya Beesnuts for preserving the series in its complete original state for all to see. Continuing on, real work wouldn't be done until around October 2021, around the time when the teasers were released. There's not much to talk about in regards to different variants of each entry, because for the most part, I was pretty straightforward with the work. Reverberation. I will say though, a majority of the first Urban Legends entry was remade entirely within a different editor altogether, Vegas Pro, before moving on to the current one I'm using, Adobe Premiere Pro. I use Premiere Pro mainly due to its handy nesting capabilities, which allow me to pull off particular effects that were done in the original Flash series. Using it as a main video editor was also as convenient as the tools I used for putting together the rest of the project.
In the pinned comment I left under the complete series upload, I made mention of AI being useful for the series. Now, before you end up gritting your teeth and popping a blood vessel, let me stress that AI was only used as it should be, a tool. Truthfully, the biggest uses I've had for it were generating voices and upscaling images, so let me clarify how that was done.
All artificial intelligence, or machine learning, tools that were used for the project are all free, some of them even open source. There's plenty of other generative tools and developments that have been made since then, including the generative text-to-speech website 11 Labs. In fact, I would be using that right now if it weren't for the fact that I'm currently on a tight budget. So I'm using a tool known as Tortoise TTS for the voices you've been hearing now. Tortoise TTS is a voice cloning text-to-speech tool using only minimal audio clips. The results are fairly decent for the most part, but it's still definitely text-to-speech. The artifacts presented within results are usually a dead giveaway. Hell, the voice you're hearing may be expressing this current sentence in a strange way. To mitigate this, I usually feed the results into a capable voice upscaling tool. For the series, I used a script, and for the voice you're hearing now, I'm using Adobe Podcast. Despite the grievances, it's a useful tool as far as open source tools go. And if you're wondering, the voices I referenced and cloned for the Remastered project are simply the same old voices used in the original Urban Legends series. Image upscaling was done through the upscaling tool Cupscale, as well as what's known as Real Ezegan. Cupscale incorporates upscaling algorithms such as Real Ezegan to get what I needed, though I will be frank about how I initially thought about this. Originally, I debated whether or not I should even upscale images. In the end, I went with a mix. Honestly, I've realized I could have gone with preserving all the original images' quality, but some of them were so bad and sourcing didn't quite help for the lot of them. There were some images I was able to source, but for most I went with the upscaling option. For videos, I used a combination of Cupscale and flow frames. Flow frames simply adds more interpolated frames to the footage, giving off a visual but synthesized sense of better frames per second. It was certainly useful for fixing a couple videos, which had an inconsistent number of frames per second. There are a couple instances where flow frames was used by itself, with no upscaling done to the original. A mixed approach felt right at the time, but if anything further is discovered or improved, maybe one day I'll go back and make a version 2 of the series. No promises, though.
I've drafted a general outline of the sources in the Rentry link I gave in the description of the complete series. It's still heavily incomplete, but to put it simply, some sources were found while others have been replaced or reworked. In the case of sound loops, there is still a chunk of loops that have yet to be identified. Here's each unidentified loop played for clarity. If you have any information on which FlashKit loops these are, let me know in the comments or by the email listed on the Rentry page. For other media, more on the specifics for each entry are coming up, as it's time to talk about differences. Each entry, as faithful as I could remake them, has minor but clear differences and changes compared to the originals. I will discuss those now.
The original that started it all, Urban Legends, Fact or Fiction. There's not a whole lot that's different, but here's what I did. I added an isolated stem track to the roller coaster segment just to give it something to transition off of. During the segment, I also used an alternate version of the loop used for the title card named Heaven's Callin' by C-Lister. I thought it was appropriate to use it for the explanation part while reserving the original for the title card. Continuing on, I changed the 50 in the subliminal messages segment to a 71 to adjust for the 21-year difference between the remastered series and the original 2001 release of Urban Legends. And of course, I edited in a quick scare at the end of the Disney segment, just as an homage to the series, really. Fun fact, I genuinely startled myself when rewatching one time. Anyways, aside from that, there was, of course, newer images used, including ones that were upscaled. Here's a look at a few of them, side to side with the originals.
This is where the new 3D intro sequences start. It's also where I decided to make a widescreen Fox design based off of the low-quality image that was used in the original. Following that, I added in a new dialogue piece for the Fox's secret segment, as in the original. There were a couple lines that weren't dubbed. Speaking of which, I went with including an upscaled version of Justin's voice because I wanted to preserve his original performance as much as I can. There were a couple ideas attempted before the final decision, one such idea being to re-record the dialogue entirely. I ended up doing that, but in the end it went unused. Here's how that would have sounded.
In February of 2000, Fox aired the special Who Wants to Marry a Multi-Millionaire? But during the filming,
Moving on, aside from a couple new visuals and an edited James Dean image, I went ahead and actually included the supposed hanging Munchkin footage for the Wizard of Oz segment. The original video it came from is long gone, but re-uploads exist if you want to take a quick dive looking for it. Everything else is just new imagery, so here's some of them side by side with the original.
Yet again, another 3D intro sequence was done for this entry. Ghosts in particular had a lot of upscaling going on, as it was the first entry I started work on a year ago. There were also edits made to the footage that was presented as well, though I have to admit fixing the frames per second on one of them may have accidentally made the supposed ghost harder to see.
Again, a 3D intro sequence was done for this entry, and that's pretty much it. Ghosts in particular had a lot of upscaling going on, as it was the first entry I started work on a year ago. There were also edits made to the footage that was presented as well, though I have to admit fixing the frames per second on one of them may have accidentally made the supposed ghost harder to see.
Not much else to say, as this was one of the few I absolutely attempted to make faithful to the original series. The only other difference being the slight adjustment to timing, but it's hard to say if anyone noticed it. Anyways, as usual, here are some of the newer images side to side with the originals.
Unidentified flying objects, aliens, extraterrestrials. They're all here in this entry. A 3D opening sequence was planned but not made in time, unfortunately, as this was the last entry I worked on. Not much else was done other than upscaling and sourcing a better quality video for the UFO footage near the end.
Origins was an interesting entry to recreate. I ended up remaking the background of the transitions in Clip Studio Paint, and I also remade the film graphic and Flash for usage in the intro. For the paint thinner segment, I added a couple edits throughout. I admittedly dropped the ball and forgot to add in the special transition used during the element part of the segment, so I hastily added a transition as an effect. Sometimes, as a last resort, you stick to what's simple.
You don't like it? Kiss my...
During the Christmas Carol segment, I added an echo effect to the carolers, which interestingly added a sense of unease, so I'm told. During viewer submissions, I didn't include the UFO video because plain and simply, I couldn't source it. I also truthfully forgot to add it in regardless, so that's on me. Anywho, guess what time it is? Yeah, that's right, comparison time.
Wow, look at that 3D.
So for this entry, I upscaled images, I sourced a high-quality clip for the Twilight Zone movie segment. I couldn't quite find the Lifetime special this clip came from, and I even threw in a poll link as an homage to the original's voting feature. There were actual responses to the poll as well, 24 responses with only 9 having comments at the end. Let's see the results, shall we?
Are the faces of Belmez fact or fiction? Tell us what you think. Does a ghost really appear in Twilight Zone, the movie? Alien rods, are they living beings, or just an effect on the camera lens? Do we finally have proof that ghosts exist, or is it just wishful thinking? Tell us what you think. Does El Chupacabra exist? Here are the additional comments. Brace yourself.
Ghosts are real, but skinwalkers are worse.
If the faces of Belmez are in Spain, why is all the EVP in English? Sounds sus. Thank you for putting this all together.
Urban legends must continue.
These videos were my introduction to jump scares as a kid.
great video series.
The tales make for great content. I am so glad to be watching this series on YouTube, and please keep them coming.
Vaginas are cryptids. I have proof.
You guys should do fact or fiction polls for all the other urban legend videos besides this one.
Part of those answers really carry the original spirit of JKC. Special thanks to those who participated. And as for the suggestion to run a poll on the entire series, we shall see what the future holds. Fun fact, the source of the scream from the Faces of Belle Mez segment comes from a clip of an old radio show, Opie and Anthony.
What is that? I like when they go like, hello, hello, hi, hi, Tom, Tom. But you walk past them and they go, ah!
Credit for finding that out goes to Reddit user Spumowany Sloth from the JK Cinema subreddit.
This entry has the typical upscaled imagery, the only other difference being a reuse case of the television image from Urban Legends, The Dead. During the Revisited segment, I made sure to specifically use the footage of the original series as a nice callback. Nothing much else to say. As the last and final entry to the Urban Legends series, I made sure to be steady with this one. I decided to go for a simple 2D graphic for the title card segment, using the same font from the original. I planned to remake the intro with Edison in a picture frame, but ultimately decided to use footage of him talking instead. I remade the backgrounds for the timeline pieces, and also used a different yet familiar sound effect for the pull-ups. I decided to only use flow frames for most of the old video footage, not a whole lot of upscaling happening video-wise. Lastly, I used newer footage for a time-lapse sky as well as typical stock footage of people walking. At the end of it, I felt decently proud of the result.
The font used throughout the series is simply titled Typewriter. However, the search for the original font felt impossible in a sea of so many fonts with similar names. Feeling lost, I ended up hashing together the font, using previous font data used throughout the entire series, essentially restoring the font to a usable degree. If there's any interest in the font, feel free to shoot me an email. The music you've heard at the beginning and end of the complete series, as well as the beginning of this special, was specially made for the project. Each part of the song represents all the 8 entries of the original series. The track will be uploaded by itself at some point in the future, when a complete playlist of all the full songs used in the series that aren't sound loops is assembled. So, we have reached the end. Working on this has been a blast, and I'm still open to ideas on a possible spin off of the Urban Legends series, but I can't quite do it alone. As is customary with anything related to the Urban Legends series, if you have any proof of the paranormal or unexplained, don't hesitate to reach out. Aside from general archived content, I'm still currently brainstorming ideas on what can be created as an original but inspired series here on the JKC archive. In the end, I think it's safe to say that the Remastered project is a magnum opus of mine. It is truly one of the biggest projects I've ever worked on. And while I've had help from a small crew of people with the website and a couple other things, I produced this project in its entirety. I hope you've enjoyed watching this special as much as I enjoyed working on the Remastered series, and I want to give a big thanks to Justin K for producing the original. You rock, man, seriously? And that's no joke. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, hopefully when I start uploading more general JK cinema content. Goodbye for now.